Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. How are you doing tonight, Brad?
I'm doing great, Tom. How are you? Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, how'd you like our musicless introduction?
Oh, that was awesome.
Nothing but fancy here.
But we're still dancing.
That's a long time. Hey, before we get started, I have to say, today's my mother's birthday, so I have to wish my mother a happy birthday.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
I think my mom's like 25 years old now or something. So
incredible.
Yeah. So.
She doesn't look a day over 24.
There you go. Well, happy birthday, Mom, if you're listening. Anyway. All right. We should probably go on. You know, one of the things I had on the docket, there's so many current event things that we could chat about
It's
tonight.
just like a flood right now.
Yeah. It's like, where do you start? What do we do? Of course, the title of today's episode is How the Regulated Market Works, in quotes. And I think the real main article we're going to talk about tonight is one, oh boy, let me get to it so I do it right. There's one that Brad found earlier. It was out of the New York Times, and it's entitled, After Big Bet, Hedge Fund Pulls the Levers of Power. It's actually quite an interesting article, lots of twists and turns, but the basic story is how capitalists, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, use the long arm of the law to get what they want, which in most cases is profits and / or power, and you might say they're the same thing, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, and we've talked about this many times on the show, Tom, and you were the one who really brought this to my attention, because I hadn't ever comprehended it in this light before, but laws are made. Laws are in our current system, as you always like to say. We get laws brought forward by a given group or individual or a sponsor, or they don't come about for absolutely no reason. They come about for an absolute reason, that somebody wants to change something or add something or what have you. And you very succinctly say that those are they do that for very selfish reasons.
Absolutely. Before we get into the details of the article, which are, I guess, going to be very important for the sake of the discussion for the evening, but the underlying issue is, if this mechanism called the state was not available, these guys wouldn't be able to do that. When I say these guys, I don't know anything firsthand. I've read the story, and that's basically all I know.
These guys could be anybody. It could be you and I. If we had the dough to push forward some legislation and sponsor, contribute enough to get a voice with a given politician.
Yes,
or a group of politicians.
And I'd argue that's the point. If you have the cash and the influence, you can make the system work for you.
Right.
But where does this leave the vast majority of people? Right? And that's one of the many troubles with the system, or using force against people, because it's usually the few against the many. And I'm more and more interested as we move along into why it is and what drives the many to perpetuate this system that's being perpetrated on them. So I just find that a little bit astonishing, but interesting.
And I got to openly admit that until we started talking and I started asking you a bunch of questions and you started explaining some of these basics to me, it never crossed my mind. I thought that I had a chip in the game in this democracy. There you go. Fire in the hole. Cannonball, pull the pin.
Yeah, democracy. I don't know where to start there. That's a big topic unto itself. But I'm
just kind of referring to me as a layperson, and anybody out there listening going, boy, these guys are nuts, as always.
Yeah, the very short version is, the shortest version is, I posted on Facebook a talk that Dr. Robert Higgs gave a little while back, not too long ago. I would strongly recommend anyone listen to that one. Higgs is one of my favorites. He's a very smart guy. But where were we? Well, I got off on the Higgs thing, and he talks about all kinds of things about the state, what the state is and what it's not, and how it's being used for purposes other than what most people think it's for. And again, that's going to be one of the points I wanted to get to in the article, so I don't want to let too much out of the bag there.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to digress a bunch, but we've got probably some new listeners on Freedom Talk Radio, and we think we have a little bit different slant to some of the other shows that are on there, and I just kind of wanted to maybe dump a little bit of background information out on everybody.
Yeah, I'm back to where, you mentioned the word democracy, and people think, I guess they feel they're part of the system because of the fact that they can vote, and that makes them part of, and these wouldn't be terms that most people use. That makes them part of the rulers as they see it, and not ruled. So we're all ruling each other in a sense, so they see it as fair. But it doesn't really matter that, like, in the fact of voting and getting office holders in there, that those people are in there transiently, right? They're only there for a relatively short amount of time and they move on. It doesn't change the fact that the ruled are, in fact, ruled by rulers, right? Just because they're there a short time, just because I may have an infinitesimal say in who it is that rules me, doesn't change the fact that there's rulers and ruled. And that's one of the many troubles with democracy as we know it. But again, that could be a couple of shows unto itself to talk about that.
It's a recurring topic for us. It's a recurring issue that we try to state, probably painstakingly too frequently. But we talk about this a lot. And the old adage that we both condone is might makes right. So you mentioned being a part of the democracy. We seem, at least I used to, would feel that, hey, I get to vote, I've got a say. Because these other schleps in these other countries that can't vote, wow, do we have something over on them? And I'm not saying that I would want to be non-voting, but I think that you've helped me to understand that I'm not sure that there's a lot of difference.
Yeah, the other aspect of voting is people think it's an end-all. Because of the fact I vote, then I basically can't complain about anything, which was actually one of the humorous things that George Carlin had said. He got people complaining to him because he openly claimed he did not vote. So people say, well, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. And he said, well, actually, on the contrary, since I didn't vote for any of this stuff, actually, I'm the guy who has the right to complain.
Right.
And you people are the ones who are creating the problems, which he has a very valid point there. But, it's just a large intertwined system that I think the real root of this, or big part of it is for people, is most people don't pay attention. They don't understand what's going on. They don't care to know what's going on. And I think that's what really leads us to our society to continually degrade. At least when I say that, I mean in terms of justice, right? Our justice is completely lost. Our liberty is lost on increasing fashion. And until we first have to learn about it and understand what it is, and then secondly, we have to take some kind of action. And again, you did very nicely last time, Brad, explaining to people, well, when we say take action, we do not mean take up arms or force. You have to take action by taking your freedom back. The state's never going to give it back to you. You're going to have to do away, and likely maybe the way, and Jeffrey Tucker's onto this, on this liberty.me thing, I think he's talking about, well, we basically function as agorists, or as people who just essentially ignore the state and go on and do their thing without them. And the problem is, the state can never really keep up. They're bureaucratic, they're huge, they're slow. So it's not that it's necessarily an overt act of defiance, but in fact it actually is. So I think that's probably the way it's going to happen, and that's a whole strategy, and how things happen is separate from understanding the philosophy of liberty. Yet it's important that people know, and I was just listening to reading a discussion. I don't even remember. I think it was on Facebook between Jason Lee Bias and Nathan Goodman, and there were some others mixed in there to be sure. And they were talking about how this happens. Does it happen gradually, or how should we push for it to happen? Or do we do, the Rothbard thing, push the button and whammo? And it was interesting discussion. I think it really boils down to, well, you aim for instantaneously. Because if you think there's injustice, why would you allow it to gradually taper off? When you say, well, it's unjust, we need to end it, right? You don't say, you know what, we'll just accept or enjoy or endure, is maybe the word, 90% next week of the injustices we had today. That'll be good. And well, the point is that means you're willing to accept injustices, and I think that's an unprincipled position. The principled position is say no, injustice is in fact unjust, and we shouldn't tolerate it. Zero.
So we always use examples, facetious examples about how voting and legislation and so forth work. And so let's use one, and then I think we should try to beam back up to a 20,000, 30,000 foot view and try to get in this article and do something even crazier for us and actually make a point that we intend to make.
Okay.
Is that intense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you always give me an example of if you wanted to legislate and you had all the dough and you had all the influence and you wanted to take this to Congress or however we enable an act, whether or maybe if it's on a local level, that everybody's favorite color should be pink, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's what we should do. I think that we're going to do a referendum where I think we're going to get laws written and motions passed, and we're all going to vote on that, or it's going to be voted in by our governing people. That everybody, and so in the end, we currently in this system have voted those people in, and those people decide for all of us based on our voting for them, our right to vote for them. Okay, I'm belligerent this point, but I'm trying to get people to think that we vote these people in, and we think we've got a say by doing so, and they say, you know what? I think we should make the favorite color for everybody pink, and we're gonna vote on that. Boom, it's a law. Everybody's favorite color has to be pink. Fill in the blank, folks, with the color pink, how we should spend your tax dollars, what we should put towards this, what rights an individual should have or shouldn't have, or what somebody should be able to do with their, I don't care what,
right?
Anything.
Yeah, how the beef industry is going to be regulated,
right?
How the environmental issues are going to be addressed, right? All those things. You have to remember. I think the argument that I would call them all the statists make, that say, yeah, this is a good system, or this is the best system known to mankind, so we should, embrace it, maybe tweak it a little bit and fix it up if there are any perceived problems. There are so many principled underlying problems that it's almost too numerous to understand, but human nature is one of the things that I think the statists misunderstand. They claim that a businessman is going to, do anything he can to make more money. Why? Because he's greedy, apparently. And there's all kinds of other characteristics or explanations they give. But understand, in the scenario you just give, where there's governing committee, governing body with individuals, understand their human nature is to do what's they believe is in their best interest. Mm-hmm. Now, me standing on the side might say, hey, that's actually not in his best interest. That's irrelevant. It's what he thinks is in his best interest. And likely, he can push, at least, or influence legislation in a way that can help that person personally, right? That would likely be in his best interest. Mm-hmm. So if let's say he doesn't care anything about the beef industry, but I see that you're a lobbyist and you're willing to spend a lot of cash, I might exert some influence that way so that I can gain your campaign contributions. Mm-hmm. I could maybe get a job for my cousin Vinny. Mm-hmm. Some way that you can repay me. Or
a big government contract for my cousin Vinny that makes a lot of cow meat.
Absolutely.
A lot of beef. Big guy.
Yeah, and a lucrative contract at that. I mean, maybe I can
fix the price.
Yeah, yes, I can get my buddies on that committee, that specific committee, to write, a really beautiful contract for my friend, my relative, etc. Right. I might have some backdoor investments that are hidden directly in companies that might benefit from this. I mean, there's so many ways to do a favor and get repaid for them. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous, right? So when people say, well, there's no hard money trail. Okay, as of yet, there may not have been a money trail discovered. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a favor and that there was payback for it, right?
Right.
You always have to, the point is, you'll always have to wonder about that given this system. If we were in a free society, you could just forget that, because there's no such mechanism that exists for this circumstance to happen.
Right.
And that's one of the many beauties of a free society that Tom here is personally advocating. But again, many aspects, but one of them is, I think, statists normally say, well, you don't understand human nature, that if there is no state, people are going to take advantage of people. I'm saying you've got this giant machine that systematically takes advantage of people. Wouldn't we all be better off just without that, just for starters? Right? And of course, the first step in getting there is beginning to understand this. And I realize most people have the difficulty of, well, how would it work? I go, my view is first, let's figure out if that's a desirable goal. If we all say, yeah, that's where we want to go, then the next question is, well, then how are we going to make that happen? But if most people leap to, how's it going to happen? And we go, well, wait, we haven't even established if that's where we want to go. So what do we really care about how yet?
Right.
And that's kind of where the center of our show is at the moment. And we've talked about it before, that it's continually evolving. We don't know where this is going. We don't even know where any one episode is going. But anyway, so I digress. But
okay.
You saw this article earlier in the week, and there's a lot of twists and turns. There's a ton of elements to it. It's an interesting story, and hopefully we can get through it in a fashion that our audience can understand what we're talking about. Because I almost think it's not a huge... lengthy story, I should say.
Right.
But again, there's a fair amount to it, and I was almost considering we should go through it kind of point by point.
Okay.
And we'll do a little...
Okay, so just to maybe summarize for a second, read the paper, look in the news, watch the news every single day. I don't care what news you watch. Yes, it's slanted and everything else, I believe. But there's always somebody getting caught with their hands in the cookie jar, or going. You're not being represented with our current system. I'll go so far as to say, I'll challenge you. Do you really think your voice, your interests, your person is, in your wishes and desires, is being fairly represented by our current system? That's challenge question number one.
Yes, and that's what we're partly going to go through on this upcoming story. And I guess before we get right to the details of the story and start analyzing the story, I should welcome everyone who's listening to us on freedomtalkradio.net. We're pleased to be here on the network, and we're hoping to be a big part of it, growing and wildly successfully at that.
Yep, we call ourselves the Annoying Peasants because
mostly because we're annoying.
We are annoying, and we are also dorky guys that like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So tune that up on YouTube, and you'll figure out, and maybe we'll even make you laugh.
Yeah.
With how we do that. So the name of the article, I heard this story on news radio that started talking about this, and so I found it, and it was actually being reported out of the New York Times. The name of the article is "After Big Bet, Hedge Fund Pulls the Levers of Power," and I believe that our discussion till now is going to be perfectly exemplified by what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, hopefully we're going to have a good example here of what we've just been saying, that you're not well served by the system. You're actually being abused by the rulers, and we just like the people to be enlightened to that. And again, just one thing, as much as this is frequently talked about on the show, how the state is a problem, it is a aggressor. It is a violator of private property rights, and we'll get into all those definitions here in a second. We like to keep the show as much as we can on what a free society would look like and how you would benefit from that. Mm-hmm. But one way to show you, most people are, unaware of what's going on now. So that is a big part of our show, to shed light on things that most people are unaware of.
Yep.
In some cases uninterested, but hopefully this will be interesting.
Exactly.
So here we go. So we're on that article. I don't know... Do you want to just give an overview, Brad, or do you just want to go through it kind of paragraph by paragraph, point by point kind of version? Whichever you think is better.
Let's go through point by point, and then let's try to summarize.
Okay.
Okay? I think that'd be a novel concept for us.
So I'll let you start with it then. If you want to do that basic setting in the beginning of what this is about, what are we talking about tonight?
Okay, so the subtitle of this is "Staking $1 billion that Herbalife will fail, then lobbying to bring it down." Okay, so this is a hedge fund manager. It's William Ackerman. Ackman, sorry. He's an activist hedge fund manager who had bet $1 billion on the collapse of the nutritional supplement company Herbalife.
Everybody's heard of Herbalife, right?
I've been around a long time, and Herbalife used to, at one point, was the hottest, greatest, latest, greatest thing to come about. But now, I think they've morphed into something that's a little bit different. So it goes on to say, offered his latest evidence to a handful of other hedge funds managers about why the company stock should soon plummet. So he decided that he's going to short this stock.
Yeah, the bottom line is his hedge fund is set up to benefit if the stock price goes down, right?
Yes.
So if it goes up, he doesn't make any money. If it goes down, he could make money, which sounds counterintuitive, but that's a whole nother story up to itself. So the deal is, as a business person, he has the incentive for the stock price to go down because that's the way he's invested in it.
Mm-hmm. It's one thing for you or I to buy some shares and hope it goes up. It's another thing, another way to play the market is that we can say, you know what, I don't think that stock's going to do very well, so we can actually short sell it. But the difference here is you and I don't have the influence and everything else to do what Mr. Ackman did, to basically make that all come true. And he's still trying, I believe.
Yes, he's still working on it, to be sure. And that's...
And it's not the first time he's done this. He's well known at doing this. And I would go so far as to say he's far from the only guy that's probably tried to do this.
Absolutely. I think this is...
It's a good gig if you can get it.
Yeah, it's a somewhat commonplace tactic that's used. Now, of course, some fellas are better at it than others. I mean, that's the whole deal. I'll just jump in here.
Please do.
The second part of the story is this is beginning of the interesting part, the interplay with the state. I call it generically is this Mr. Ackman. He's at some soiree,
hoity-toity steak thing.
Yeah, where there's a lot of influential people there. Apparently in New York, I believe it was actually Manhattan, if I have my facts straight.
Someplace probably you and I weren't invited, I don't think.
Yes, and he talks about that this representative, Linda Sanchez from California, had sent a letter to the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, basically talking about, well, there's going to be an investigation of Herbalife, right? But here's you say, well, what's the big deal? So what? Who cares? Well, the deal is, he's at this dinner announcing this, and actually the letter gets written the next day. So in other words, he's announcing that this letter's been sent before the letter's been sent. Like, well, how could he know this? The guy is really smart, right?
Incredible.
Yeah. So the deal is, obviously, he had something to do with the creation of the letter and knew it was going out. And even beyond that, apparently the letter actually goes out a month later, not a day later. And wait, there's, according to the article again, the evidence is there that the letter was sent, in fact, out a month later, but backdated, I think, either the day after or the day before Mr. Ackman actually spoke. Mm-hmm. So they theoretically have this evidence that the letter was backdated. And, of course, when they got caught with that, they said, well, it's all proper and fine. It's not a big deal.
Right.
So that was the beginning part of Mr. Ackman using the state to gain the objective that he wants, which is, again, to get the stock price to go down.
So just to be clear, this Ms. Sanchez that wrote the letter.
Yes.
Okay.
To the FTC.
This is Ms. Sanchez, an elected official.
Yes. Of the state of California.
Yes.
So, and again, this is all done to try to move the stock price down. And the stock price can move down even on an announcement that the FTC is investigating you, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All your peers, people in this business community hear this and they go, uh-oh, we better stay away from these guys. They could be going down. And we don't want any part of it. So just the notion that on the investor side, you realize, hey, if there is an investigation brought, it costs a lot of money to fend it off, even if there's no foundational legal basis for it, right? It costs money. Well, that affects the stock price. We go, oh, they're going to spend all this money on this stuff. Maybe we'll just buy stock elsewhere that isn't going through this.
It's a very good point. Because I threw out to you, Tom, that this is what's going to happen, and they were trying to drive down the stock price, and then you threw in all these other things that I think are very important, and that's one of them, that it could cost, one of the ways it could cost a normal investor or a taxpayer like you and I is that if we happen to like Herbalife and he's trying to take the ship down, it's going to cost me a lot of money because already the stock's going to be tainted.
And most people will ask, well, I'll just put it out there first. Do you think this is an appropriate use of the taxpayers' money for this investigation to go under? Now, you'd say, well, yes, if there's some phony baloney going on, and that's what the investigation will tell you. Well, you have to, it's like a cop stopping you. They can't, you say, well, is that a more unwarranted use of a cop's time, money, energy, etc., to pull me over, and they can root around in my car, and then they find an open beer can in the back seat? Mm-hmm. Well, that to me is entirely different than the cop seeing me drive erratically. Mm-hmm. And I know this ain't a great example, by the way, because the whole idea is you have probable cause versus no probable cause.
Yes,
that's a giant difference. That's not a little difference.
Sure.
Most people say, well, the underlying fact is that you're guilty of drinking while driving, right? Mm-hmm. Which again, I'm telling you, this is a crappy example, but and that in the theoretically in the U.S. Constitution, no, you're presumed innocent. Remember. So you cannot presume a person guilty. I cannot assume that you're drinking while driving and pull you over and then search it to try to find it because I presumed you were guilty first. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the presumption of innocence is really important. I think that's part of why it was written down in that document. But again, I wasn't there.
Right.
So I don't know. Anyway, so I digressed again a little bit. But I have to clarify here that this Ms. Sanchez's office, she issued a news release a month later, as it turns out, again, according to this article, and it was in fact dated as it was as if it had been made public the day before Mr. Ackman's speech or dinner talk or at the soiree. So they made it look like the letter came out, and the next day he spoke about this, and this has all apparently come out in the wash that the letter actually all happened a month later, not the day before. Okay. So that's one, maybe, I don't know how important, but it is. It starts to build up the story.
Does, for sure.
So if you want to add the next chunk there, Brad?
We're going on where the corporate money is forever finding?
Yeah, I think the next note says they said this is just a small hint of Mr. Ackman's extraordinary attempt to leverage the corridors of power. And see, as soon as I hear corridors of power, I'm off on House of Cards right away. But that's another show. We might actually talk about that on the Blog Talk show.
It's a good show too.
Because I found a great article about that one too.
Okay.
So this is the beginning of using this corporate government power, to gain again what Mr. Ackman wanted, which is of course the stock price to fall. But I've been, at least he's quoted in this article as saying that Mr. Ackman's campaign is to take this fight to the end of the earth using every weapon in the arsenal that Washington offers. Now that's not in quotes in the article, but I see that as big. Oh, so he's using everything that Washington has.
I don't think this could be more plain to the point of what we're trying to say about the system.
Right, and this is just driving home the basic fact again that the high and mighty, the elites, the connected elites, those are the ones who are driving the game. The masses who don't have that influence are the sufferers of whatever those elites do. And I don't know, some people will say, well, that's nothing new, Tom. We're well aware of that. But we just want to keep driving that point home so people understand, because if they understand that, I think they would change their ideas a little bit.
Yes. And
I think to them it's just a news story, and we're going to try to drive that home more deeper here.
Hopefully we're going to make somebody think a little bit in this.
Absolutely. One of the interesting things that Mr. Ackman he also tried to use all kinds of influential groups. And when I say influential, it's the old air quote deal again. But the interesting thing, one of the accusations he made is that Herbalife is mistreating, I don't know if abusing's the right word, but not treating the Latino crowd and I think the black crowd to some extent, because apparently those demographics are big into this Herbalife, which is unknown to me, and I'm not saying that's a fact. That was cited here in the article. So what he did is he found quote unquote influential leaders in that community, in those communities, I should say. And actually what happened was there was kind of a bidding war because he wanted to gain their influence. So they would actually come out of the woodwork. People that he didn't really contact, they would come to him and say, hey, for a certain sum of cash, we would be willing to go public and say Herbalife is mistreating members of our community. Mm-hmm. So he thought, I only have this finite amount of money to spend, so I'll get back to you and see if I can't get a better offer. And you're saying, for $100,000, I'll see if someone will do it for $90,000.
Right.
So there's actually a bidding war. Now, I'm not so entirely bent out of shape of this because this is basically, I see that as peaceable exchange. You agree to provide a service for nobody's property rights would be violated. I'm just throwing that in as that's part of this story.
Sure.
I'm not saying this is the bad graces of government. Obviously, that's outside of it. But the point is, as we all know, we understand human nature. There's shady characters all over the place. And again, if this mechanism didn't exist, they wouldn't have the ability to exert their authority on us like they do.
Right.
So
the article, if I can read from it, says,
yes.
to pressure state, and we kind of said this, to pressure state and federal regulators to investigate Herbalife, an act that alone could cause a stock to dive, as we've already mentioned. His team helped organize protests, news conferences, and letter-writing campaigns in California, Nevada, Connecticut, New York, and Illinois, although several of the people who signed the letters to state and federal officials say they do not remember sending them, according to the New York Times. So he's working the media. He's trying to absolutely slander Herbalife in whatever way he can, so he can force the stock into decline.
Yes.
So he can pocket up to $1 billion. I think is what he's done in this previously.
Yeah, he's aiming for more than $1 billion for he and or slash his hedge fund, and I don't know where exact separation between him and the hedge fund is. Right? Technically, where it is. But he shelled out apparently about $130,000 to these civil rights organizations to stir up this media frenzy on his behalf, and again, against Herbalife. By the way, again, according to this article, Herbalife denies that there's any wrongdoing. There's nothing here. And also, as a side effect, the stock price of Herbalife has gone up through this whole thing, and the revenues are at all-time highs. Now, again, I'm not saying Herbalife is a good organization.
We're not endorsing Herbalife by any means.
I don't know. We're just talking about what's reported here, just so people don't get sidetracked. And again, that's one thing that's cited in here, that Herbalife has mobilized its own army of lobbyists to defend itself.
Right.
So here you go. Now you've got influencing groups on both sides.
Yep.
So here you got a politician, and it's going to turn out, it's not one politician, by the way. There's more than a couple involved in this. But he's sitting there, again, imagine human nature. He's sitting there going, Herbalife side, not them directly, but someone is saying, hey, I would like you to do this. He got this Ackman in his side saying, hey, you do this. Well, he's got him. I'm sure the politicians are just weighing their options. Which side of this fence do I want to be on? Because I want to be on the side where I benefit more greatly than any other, right? So
yep.
It's just a crazy idea, a crazy system.
And I think I'm going to make a footnote there. I think that many of us are taught that politicians, and I'm going to make some people laugh, but that they're idealists and that they're out for fairness. And I also would go so far as to say that I think that they are absolutely for their own self-interest, that they at the very minimum would absolutely not want to get stuck out in the rain in this thing. So they're going to carefully choose what might be least damaging. To go so far as to say might choose the side of whichever is going to benefit them most, I think is absolutely a distinct possibility.
Certainly. One of the points I made a little earlier, I'll just read it so you get it right from the article. The feud has touched off a bidding war of sorts. Emails obtained by the Times, again the New York Times, as the advocacy groups have in some cases pressed Mr. Ackman's team and Herbalife to contribute more money in exchange for their allegiance. So there's a bidding war going on for this to try to get money out of either side. They don't really care. They just want the cash. So you just tell us where a better deal is, and that's the side we're going to be on. So it does lend you know, well, is there any truth to this? If these community groups, and again, I'm not saying the community groups are altruistic or pure to begin with, but if there's really something to this allegation that Herbalife is mistreating these minorities, you think their representatives, their leadership, their however you want to call them, their advocacy groups wouldn't be willing to sell to either side. They're saying, hey, they're screwing our guys over, we're going to make us think about it. But apparently, so it makes me wonder if there's any legitimacy to the original claim that Herbalife is abusive in any way.
Okay.
I wanted to. There's actually a couple. This is an important point. I think most people say, well, and again, we're back to the how. That is very important to most people. They say, well, how are you going to do it? Operate any system if you don't have an impartial third party, which most people, well, that's the point of the state. So when Brad and I have a dispute, we got this other agency to come in and go, okay, wait, we're just going to uncover the facts and we're going to see who's right in this dispute, and that will be binding on the both of you, right? That's the idea of a beef industry regulator. That guy's got no skin in the game, as it were, in the beef industry and the company he's overseeing. His skin in the game is, I'm just here to protect the consumer, right? So any independent third party. Well, listen to this. This is according to the article itself. It says, regulators frequently get entreaties from financiers urging action for their own financial gain, like the hedge fund executives who in 2010 tried to secretly push Obama administration officials to investigate for profit colleges, again citing fraudulent industry practices after betting that their stocks would decline. Same game, right? So, first of all, I read that and I was absolutely shocked that these regulators were not actually third-party, impartial, right? You got to be right. The whole point is they're subject to influence.
Yes.
That makes them right there not impartial as most people see them. Go on a little details on this, but Mr. Ackman's efforts illustrate how Washington is increasingly becoming a battleground of Wall Street's financial titans, whose interest in influencing public policy is driven primarily by a desire for profit, part of an expanding practice in the nation's capital with corporations, law firms, and lobbying practices establishing political intelligence units to gather news they can trade on. Okay, again, a little back up to what we said more closely to the beginning of the show. If this mechanism didn't exist, these lobbying firms, these law firms, other corporations, all this stuff wouldn't go on. Why? Because there's no mechanism for them to use. And you have to see this in the broader perspective as, is this actually creating wealth for society as a whole by these guys lobbying? Answer is no. They're engaged in destroying wealth. I mean, as a result of all this, do more pencils get created? Do more automobiles get created? Is there more fruit available? Right? Is there a good service that you wanted that's now available that wasn't available? Nothing, no wealth is created in all these shenanigans. Wealth is in fact destroyed.
Okay, wait a minute. What if I'm one of Mr. Ackerman's high rollers that he's got some of my cash? That's going to create some wealth.
That is a fantastic point. That's a great point. So what actually happens is, what I'm saying is it's a net wealth destruction. Yes, I realize that you may go up, your bottom line goes up by $3, but the net of everyone else, say, went down by $5.
Okay.
So I'm not denying that you make cash out of screwing people, right? I'm just saying on balance, it's a net loss to the wealth of society. Okay, and that's the part I think that's also important. And I know most people say, well, I don't care what happens to society as long as I get mine. Well, again, you can get yours, but look at what's happening. If this mechanism, the state, didn't exist, the only way that you could create wealth, and this is one of the pet peeves I had about that paragraph I read, they basically made profit sound like it's a bad thing, like they're greedy suckers. All they're doing is for the profit. I don't deny they're attempting to make a profit. But again, in a free market, a truly free market, the only way to create a profit is by satisfying customers. Here's an example of how you can make a profit by basically using the long arm of the law to screw somebody else over. Again, that mechanism wouldn't be there. These shenanigans wouldn't be going on. Because a big accusation against anarchists is we don't understand that there's evil people in the world don't do this. And I'm saying, why have this giant loaded gun in the room? Right? If we get rid of that, we'll all be better off.
Well, you're certainly diffusing or neutralizing that by saying that's happening now. And if we and I think back to your point, if we didn't have this mechanism that could be bought, pretty much is what we're saying, influenced,
yes.
Power, bought otherwise, that it would be better.
Yes, the accusation is that anarchists don't understand human nature. I would argue the accusation is completely fallacious. It's the opposite. It's the statists don't recognize human nature. They think that this benevolent agency will be able to take care of everything. Which is the big gun in the room. That's actually the problem. They think the solution to their problem is what is actually creating the problem. They don't understand that. They don't see that. And that's what we're trying to point out here today.
Okay, good.
So, I run across that accusation again, anarchists. It's like, you just don't understand how human nature, you don't understand how things work. And I'm like, yeah, actually, see, I'm saying I do understand how they work. Just check with Mr. Ackman. You tell me. Read the story. That's how things work. And all I'm saying is I object to it.
So it goes on and says, so far, Mr. Ackman has persuaded 4 members of Congress, a New York State Senator, a City Council member in Boston, the Majority Leader of the state, the Nevada Senate, and other elected officials in California to join the cause.
Wait a minute. Before you finish that, I just want to say, notice here, they did not name names.
They have a blue and underline, so I think we could click the links, but it doesn't really matter.
Right, and I'm not saying it's a major point to this article, but these are the goofy things that I pick out. It's like, wait a minute, if you're doing this article, name names, right. And some names are found later in the article. But there, when I was reading it first, I'm like, hey, you're gonna do this article, name names, don't be scared. But okay, right. So sorry,
no, it's fine. Pick up your next point, Tom.
What is? Did I even have a point? Anyway, I just want to. The article goes on to explain that at this point, Herbalife, their stock price has been going up, and their revenues are a record, standing at $4.8 billion a year. So these aren't small fries that we're talking about. We're talking about firms that are in, near $5 billion worth of revenue a year. And so you can understand there's a lot of shares of stock outstanding. If you can make them go in the direction that you want them to go, even a small amount, but multiplied overall the numbers of shares, we're talking about huge dollars. There's a lot of money at stake.
So in the article, then the article goes on to say that Mr. Ackerman has argued that he is trying to protect Hispanics, who he says are the most frequently recruited by Herbalife as distributors, and this is a pyramid-like organization. They were very prominent when Amway was prominent, whatever, only to find out that there is very little money to be made. He goes on that Mr. Ackerman's staff acknowledges that this crusade is really rooted in one goal: finding a way to undermine public confidence in Herbalife so that his billion-dollar bet will produce an equally enormous return. Mr. Ackerman said he will donate any profits he personally earns to charity, calling it blood money. The clients who invest in his hedge fund, however, would still benefit enormously. Dang it, I didn't get in on this thing.
Yeah, no kidding. How come you didn't alert me to this about 2 years ago when I could have made some money?
Could have sent him my $20.
Yeah, no kidding. Part of the article goes on to talk about some of the groups, the leadership of these advocate groups, these civil rights groups, that supposedly they wrote letters either for Herbalife. In most cases, it was against Herbalife, but the article cites them on both sides. When the New York Times reporter went back to these people to ask about what they had written, why they had written, what was the substantiation, a number of them said they don't even remember writing the letter. So it seems a little fuzzy there.
Well, let's be clear. So this Brent Wilkes, the National Executive Director of the Washington-based League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, I guess.
Yes.
Rejected any suggestion that he had become Mr. Ackerman's tool.
Ooh, what an ugly accusation to be a tool.
Even though his organization accepted a $10,000 contribution early last year, and since then he has taken a position at the forefront of the anti-Herbalife campaign. What happened there?
Yeah, so his group accepted $10,000, and then all of a sudden they happen to have the same side as Mr. Ackman.
Yeah. Hey.
And again, I can't sit here and tell you, well, that's in contrast to where his heart was or where his knowledge was before.
Nor are we saying that Hispanics are maybe not being preyed upon.
Right.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
Yeah. Again, we don't know the underlying facts of the case. We're just talking about what's being reported here.
Right.
Interesting nonetheless. Then I had another earth-shaking quote here that comes from Harvey Pitt, a former chairman of the SEC, that's the Security and Exchange Commission. He said that Mr. Ackman's campaign was starting to look like an effort to move the price rather than spread the truth. And again, this would be, as an anarchist, I look at this as astonishing. Well, isn't human nature to benefit yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Well, of course he's trying to move the stock price. If he's openly said, and I'm going to take the article at its word, that he claims he's going to make money if the price moves down, well, of course he's going to try to make the price move that way. I'm amazed by these guys, at the SEC, that, very prominent, in this case, former government officials, like, you got to be kidding me. That's what you're saying? Hello, that's painfully obvious. But apparently that was a kind of a revelation to him, And of course, Mr. Ackman says, hey, I haven't done anything wrong. And in fact, I'm also not asserting that he has done anything illegal.
Exactly.
Now,
that's an important point.
Yes. I mean, this may all be above board. This is the way things get done. This is the way it works.
Right.
Right? And people will constantly, again, say that, Tom, you don't get how things work. And I'm, again, asserting, yes, I do get how they work. I object to it, is the difference. So I think that's, excuse me, very interesting to see the tomfoolery, as it were, that goes on.
Right.
It's just amazing. Part of the reason, apparently, that the stock price may have gone up is because Carl Icahn, for whatever reason, may have apparently jumped in and he bought a whole bunch of shares of the stock, which, of course, a lot of people sit on the sideline, or I should say smaller hedge fund managers go, hey, if Icahn's buying, he must know something.
Right.
So then they start buying. And
exactly. It's like following Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett.
Exactly.
Well, it's good enough for him.
Yep.
Good enough for me.
Exactly. He's my advisor.
That's right.
Bingo.
That's right.
Anyway.
So in this, Tom, you made a point to me when I told you the story, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing thunder. If this gets into a judicial battle, if this gets into the courts somehow, and I don't know if the article goes on to say that it's going to or not, but certainly there's a place for it. So it gets into the courts, and let's say you and I are big cheese Herbalife investors, and we go, well, this is a bunch of crap. We don't want that. Or maybe we get a bunch of little cheese Herbalife investors, and we get our power built up, and we say, this is a rotten deal. We're going to go after this Ackman guy.
Right.
Because he's trying to affect my investment in this business. So your point that you made is it's another way that it's going to drive down or take away wealth, because all that's going to do is tie up a whole bunch of fiscal money in the court system, the staff, the buildings, the judges, all the parts that go along. Those aren't, a lot of, I think people look at those as free. But they are coming out of our tax money.
Absolutely. As far as I know, none of those fellows are working for free, and gals.
Right.
Right. But I don't think the energy companies are supplying natural gas or oil to heat the places for free.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute, this is going to a federal court building? Okay,
Right.
it's free.
Right.
Right? And even if it were, if they technically didn't charge them, well, of course the rest of the customers are making up for that. Right? So even if somebody go, well, look, there's no bill for that, or here's a bill and it shows there was zero charge. So in fact, it was free. It's not possible. There's no such thing as free. Right? You and I pay a higher rate to make up for that.
Right.
Right? And you say, well, no, they actually gave it up for free. Well, the bottom line is, again, it's a stock price deal for them and their competing energy companies. They have to make this up somehow. Otherwise, their stock price goes down and their principals stand to lose millions. And, of course, they're stockholders. They're little guys, if there's any in there. They stand to lose money. And what do? They wind up jumping ship. They go cash out their investment and go somewhere else. So
right.
the capital moves as a result of all the shenanigans that go on. And again, like I said, it costs tons of money. And that maybe the most important point of the whole story that people see this stuff as free. There is nothing that is free. Just because it comes at no cost, maybe to me, doesn't mean it's free.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's the thing people have to understand. Just because I don't bear the cost, the point is somebody else has to bear the cost.
And you and I don't have a single, let's say we're not the Herbalife guys, but a bunch of Herbalife guys do. You and I don't have a single skin in this game, but we're going to get to help pay for all these shenanigans.
Absolutely. All us poor schleps who go to work every day,
Yep.
trust me, you are paying for this crap.
Right.
And you will also be subject to when things get changed that are not in your favor, you're just going to get mashed in the process. And don't think, I would argue, the fallacy of the ability to vote doesn't change anything. You still get mashed by the rulers.
Okay, that's good, because I'm looking at the clock and we need to start summarizing and wrapping up. Is there anything from this article, anything else that you want to talk about? Have we hit enough points? We have time.
We probably have, but the real question is, do you have 4 days? Because you know how I can go off on a tangent.
We could go on every tangent on this about liberty and about the current system and everything else. We're going to try to make the points that we said we were going to make. That is this a fair system? Is this fair for Mr. Ackman to do this, to use his influence, power, wealth to try to take down an investment or a company with investors, everyday Joe Blows, or big high rollers, you don't know who?
Yes. Two things. When you say fair, I like to use the word just.
Fine.
Is it right? Is it just is the question. And then again, I know that the arguments are, well, who defines justice? And we'll get to that in this show. And we'll get to it ad nauseum. So just hang in there.
Okay.
But the other thing is, again, I'm pointing out, this may be, just from what I've read, and again, that's how I'm going to form my opinion for on this show, just so people understand. I would say this is unjust. Okay, but that does not mean it's illegal, right? There's a lot of laws that I think are in place that are in fact unjust. Mm-hmm. So don't conflate the two terms. If we believe it, and again in later shows will in great detail provide definition and example of what justice is and what justice is not. So you just kind of have to put that in your back pocket.
Okay.
But again, just because something is legal doesn't mean it's just. Just because something is just doesn't mean it should be illegal in a moral sense. But again, I'll leave that aside. But that's what's interesting. So I'm not saying, again, from what I've read in this article, that Mr. Ackman is engaging in any illegal activity. Everything he might be doing could be completely above board.
Right.
Again, to me, all the facts are not known. But I think people will jump to this if they don't like what he's doing, then he's a crook, he's a criminal.
Right.
Well, what defines what a crook or a criminal is if you're doing something illegal?
And you're absolutely not saying that. And
Right.
We're not accusing anybody in this. We're
Right.
trying to make a point to our listeners to think about all of this going on, and if they think it's good, if it's fair, just, that a system has such, flaws?
Yeah, it was so unjust.
So unjust.
Yeah, and that's the real issue. Again, people think because they have the ability to vote, they're responsible. They're partly the government. So there's no, if that was the case, which
Right.
I think most people do see that way, then there's no such a thing as injustice. Right? If you see it that way, I'm saying. I don't see it that way, but I think a lot of people do. Well, we really can't blame anybody else because we are the government. It's us doing it to ourselves.
Right.
Well, then if you believe that, there is no such thing as injustice. If there is no injustice, there's no such thing as theft. There's no such thing as murder as a legal term, right? Mm-hmm. And if there is no such thing, and I'll go ahead and completely whack on you, because I've read this in a book before, and I can't remember who wrote this. It might be like Lysander Spooner. He said, if there is no such thing as injustice, then there is no such thing as theft and murder and rape. And then that means what happened in the Holocaust. There's no responsibility. Nobody actually died. Because there's no such thing as murder, right?
Right.
Because it's us doing it to ourselves.
Completely absurd.
It is.
But back to where you started.
Yeah. It's craziness that how people see this. And we're just trying to shed the light on the shenanigans that go on, what you and I are paying for on a daily basis, and I think we are, in a sense, responsible for this because of our lack of understanding of liberty. If we understood what liberty was, that'd be step one. Step two is to take action. But I fear that we're not even remotely close as a society to getting to step one yet, which is why we're here.
Yeah, and we don't have time to get into this, but I think everybody listening, if you're not familiar with liberty and Tom's thoughts or any other anarchist thoughts, is heck, we've got liberty, and that's an entirely different story, and that's an entirely different show, weeks of shows. But think about, in this instance, is it just? And do you have liberty? And if this ticks you off, I would ask and invite you to keep listening and ask questions and give Tom's ideas and positions some thought.
Yeah, and one last thing I'd like to add about the story, because I found this interesting. This is at the end, and so we're going to wrap this up here very quickly, but I thought I had to add this tidbit. The Nevada Attorney General is not pursuing this. Why? Because no victims have come forward. Theoretically, the Attorney General's office says, hey, a victim comes to the Attorney General and says, hey, Brad screwed me over.
Right.
I want to make sure justice is served, right?
Yep.
No one has done that in the state of Nevada. Mm-hmm. So the Attorney General's like, there's kind of nothing I can do because there's no victim, right? At least to this point, or at least to the point when the article was written.
Right.
So I think that's actually, in a sense, that's a very important element to this story, that, okay, there's all this allegations, all this money's being spent, all this stuff, and you even have someone representing the state, in this case the state of Nevada, saying, well, I got no victims, so...
So, again, just think about the power that was used here. Was it fair? I don't know. I'll let you wrap it up, and I think we should. We got maybe a minute or two to go, Tom.
Yeah, so I got to get on the right page here. Okay. Yeah, so just stick with us. Next week, we're going to have another topic, which likely will either be another example of this kind of chicanery going on, or we'll talk more a little bit about freedom, and we'll get maybe into these definitions so people can have a better understanding of where we come from and what this topic of anarchy is all about. And we'll point you to some references. Of course, I earlier mentioned Dr. Robert Higgs, fantastic guy to listen to. A bunch of YouTubes, you could hear what he has to say. And again, I posted one on our Facebook page. That's Annoying Peasant Radio. On Facebook. So check that out. Tanya does a fantastic job on there. There's always cool stuff on there.
Yep, and your blog, all this stuff is linked on Facebook, I believe. But find us on Facebook. Let us know that you're listening. We'd love to hear from you. If you got any questions, you can always message us. And I think there's an email link on Facebook as well. So check us out there, everybody.
Cool.
And we appreciate you listening. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. We look forward to being again with you next week. Same time.
This is Tom and Brad, the Annoying Peasants, saying good night.
Good night, everybody.